Ladies and gentlemen, it is a big honor and treat to be here tonight. But before I begin, I have a little treat for you. He is described by People magazine as one of the youngest and breakout stars of the comedy scene in New York City. I'm proud to present for just a moment, ladies and gentlemen, my son, comedian extraordinaire, Rabbi Samuels.
People's magazine, okay. No pressure. How you guys doing? You guys good? Yeah. That's a good crowd. It's funny because this is my dad. This is my father. I grew up as the rabbi's son. And here's the thing, when you grow up as a rabbi's son, he tends to be in the rabbi mode a lot of the time, which means a lot of his advice that he would give us would be like, as a rabbi instead of maybe as a father. He used to say, if you ever see a stranger and he offers you candy, make sure the candy is kosher. And we're like, what? And I was 5 at the time, and I'm like, this does not sound right. It's funny, because as a comedian, you kind of fall into being a comedian, you know? Because you realize you're not really good at a lot of other things. I've been through a lot of jobs. I've been fired from a lot of jobs. When you get fired from a lot of jobs, you realize there's a lot of ways to be fired. I worked at this pizza shop once, and every week that I would come in, the guy would take a day off. So he'd say, you don't have to come in Mondays anymore. Come in Tuesday to Fridays. I'd come in the next week. He'd say, don't come in Tuesday anymore. Come in Wednesday to Fridays. This guy was firing me in slow motion. Like by the end of the month, I had a minute and a half left. It's interesting because I worked at a school, and here, you ever get fired, but you get fired for a different reason that you thought you were going to get fired? Of course, you guys not, because you guys are normal human beings, but that's something I did, something for me. And I worked at a school, and the principal brought me in, and he says, listen, we're going to have to let you go. And I'm like, I understand, I totally get it. He's like, we just don't think you're a good influence. I'm like, influence? I never show up. How would you guys know? I worked at a pharmacy. Here's the worst part about working in a pharmacy. You can never call him sick. You can't be like, I got a stomach ache. You'd be like, dude, come in. We have everything. That's my time for the day, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming out. This is really amazing. And of course, what the people just said before, my brother does have a rare disease, and this does mean a lot to me. And so thank you guys for coming out. And here's Rabbi Samuels.
Ladies and gentlemen, today is a very special event. I'm reminded of a story. Very, very famous golfer. For those of you in the room that are big golfers, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's actually an entire tournament for people who are sight impaired, who can't see, but nonetheless play golf. Charlie Boswell was one such person, and in World War II, unfortunately, he was injured. When he returned home, there wasn't a lot he could do, but the game of golf was something he wanted to excel in. And excel he did. Ultimately, he won the sight, it was called Sight Unseen, but the golf tournament for sight impaired 13 years in a row. And ultimately, in 1958, he won his hero's name as an award, Mr. Ben Hogan. Ben Hogan, one of the greatest golfers of all time, met with Charlie, and as they talked for a while, Charlie said to Ben, listen, I'd love to go out there and play a game with you. And Ben was honored. Charlie, I'd be happy anytime. But Charlie wasn't satisfied with that. I want to bet you $100 that I could win. Here Ben felt uncomfortable. Charlie, he said, I don't think you can. Please, let's just do it for fun. But Charlie insisted. I could win, he said. Ben said, you know, I'm one of the top pro golfers in the world today. Let's just have a friendly game, but Charlie wouldn't give in. And so finally he said, fine, if that's the way you want it, Charlie, we'll play a game when? And Charlie said, How about tonight at 11? My dear friends, Friendship Circle is an organization, as you heard before, that means a lot to myself and my family. I'm reminded of a story. I actually met one of the students of a teacher named Miss Thompson. Miss Thompson was a 5th grade teacher, an extraordinary one. She worked in a small city in the state of Ohio. And the first day of school, she said what some teachers say, but to her, it was a lie. She would say, "Kids, welcome to the first day of school. I want you to know that I love you all the same." But the truth of the matter is there were some kids that got under her nerves, especially one particular child, Teddy. He sat in the front row, but he daydreamed, never paid attention, looked disheveled, didn't interact well with other students. He was a real bother. Mrs. Thompson, the ultimate professional, would do all she could, but to be honest, when she could write that big red F on his paperwork, she did so with a smile. Maybe Teddy won't be coming again. The school demanded that every teacher go through the last year's files and find out about each student. She did so. And she looked at Teddy's previous achievements, etc. And what she found made her feel ashamed. His 1st grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is a wonderful, bright, enthusiastic child. He does phenomenally well. I only hope his mother's illness doesn't affect him negatively." His 2nd grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is a wonderful child. He's trying his best. But his mother's deep illness, unfortunately, seems to be taking a toll." His 3rd grade teacher said, "I'm sorry. Teddy used to be such a light child since the passing of his mother. It seems that he is slipping." His 4th grade teacher wrote, "Teddy seems to be more and more out of it. He seems to have a lack of attention. I'm afraid if someone doesn't get a hold of Teddy soon, we will lose him." And here she stood embarrassed. She knew what she had to do. The next day it was the holiday party, and everyone in class came with their gifts, brightly colored paper, except for Teddy. He came with a gift as well. He came with a paper bag with a string around it. When it was time to open his present, all the children started laughing. Out she pulled a beautiful bracelet of rhinestones, although a few were missing, and a quarter of a bottle of perfume. Immediately Mrs. Thompson hushed them and said, "This is my favorite gift." She even put on the bracelet and dabbed some of that perfume. At the end of the day, Teddy walked over to Mrs. Thompson. He said, "Thank you. Today, you smelled like my mom." From then on, Mrs. Thompson took special care for Teddy. Day after day, she worked with him. By the end of the semester, Teddy was one of the best students in the class. By the end of the year, he was the very best. A few years later, Mrs. Thompson received a letter. Teddy had just graduated high school, graduated with honors. A few years after that, another letter reminding Mrs. Thompson she was still his favorite teacher, graduating with a master's from college. But still, with all of the professors that he had, he reminded Mrs. Thompson she was still his favorite. And then, 4 years after that, beautiful letter, but this time, Theodore Godel, MD, adorned the end of his letter, reminding that although he was in medical school, his favorite teacher was still Mrs. Thompson. And 4 years after that, a final letter, this time in the form of an invitation. It was a wedding invitation. Teddy's father had passed away the year before, and he wanted to know if Mrs. Thompson would mind at the wedding to sit where the mother of the groom might usually sit. Of course, Mrs. Thompson said, "I wouldn't miss it for the world." And yes, she did wear that rhinestone bracelet, and she had that perfume on. And after the beautiful ceremony, Teddy went over to Mrs. Thompson and he said, I cannot thank you for everything that you did for me, for I am here today only because of you. To which Mrs. Thompson, with a tear in her eye, said, it is you that I have to thank, because it is you that taught me. Until now, I used to teach math and science and social studies, but today, I teach children. My friends, the story illustrates what I think Friendship Circle does, most definitely for myself and my wife, and for so many families around the world. It helps us understand that each and every individual has something to offer, and perhaps at times can be our teacher. My wife and I were blessed with 6 boys. One of them became a comedian. That's a joke, it's okay. My youngest son, and by the way, my wife is not happy with me. I do not have any girls. My youngest son was born January 29th, 2009. It seemed to be normal, but as many of you have gone through, the doctor comes into the room, a somber look. There is something wrong. We were in the hospital at the time. They tried a lot of different tests. Unfortunately, we had no idea. After a month in the hospital, during that period of time, there was one therapist who said she had heard, she just came back from a conference in New York, and she heard about an extraordinary, very rare disorder, and she wanted to know if she could do research and take blood from our son. Of course we acquiesced. No harm, no foul. She explained that it was impossible that our son would have it, being that we lived in a small little town in Connecticut. We were then rushed to Boston Hospital. We were over a weekend there, and on Monday morning when they came to do tests on our son, as he just turned a month old, we got a call from the lab at NYU. Did you get the results yet? The gentleman said on the phone. I'm afraid not. We called the hospital and found out on that very moment that our son was positive for familial dysautonomia. As some of you, I'm sure, have experienced, our whole world crashed. The word positive had never meant something so negative in our lives. What would this mean? At that point, the entire hospital and all its staff gathered us together in a boardroom, and the chief executive officer said, we pride ourselves at Boston Children as being one of the best hospitals in the world. We know about every disorder, unfortunately, except for this one. We're sending you in an ambulance to NYU. We were rushed to New York, and being a Brooklyn boy myself, I'm not sure you've ever really experienced a New York hospital, but it's somewhat different than what I was used to. We waited 45 minutes to an hour just to get onto the elevator to go upstairs to a very crowded and small NICU. When we entered, we asked where our child was, and we were informed he wasn't there. Did you lose our child? We said. Well, it's happened before, said the jolly man. Attempt at humor that we did not find funny at the time. Ultimately, our son went through surgeries and came back home. In the beginning, we had a very, very hard time dealing with it. The ultimate nightmare of finding out that your child is not well was something we struggled with. But as time went on, we learned not only to cope, but learned of the true blessing that our son would ultimately give us. Empathy was a word always heard, but I must admit, did not truly understand until our little Mater was born. You know, when I moved to Connecticut many years ago, I got a call from a gentleman within the first week. He was crying. He said, Rabbi, Lily passed away. I need your help. I've never met the man, and I wasn't sure who Lily was, but I put on my rabbi hat and I said, I am here for you. What can I do? I said, I'd be happy to do a funeral. He said, you would do that for us? I said, I definitely would. I said, I can arrange Kaddish to be said. He said, that's extraordinary. Thank you so much. I said, I'd be happy to. I said, let's talk about burial. To which he said, oh, Rabbi, we took care of that. She's buried in the backyard. Coming from Brooklyn, I thought to myself, what a strange place. I said, aren't there any cemeteries? To which he said, I wish there were more of those. You do? Of course, after a short while, I realized we were talking about his Cocker Spaniel. And although now, living in New England for many years, I do understand the relationship between people and their pets. At the time, coming from New York, the only time you really see a dog is when you cross the street to run away. And so here is a gentleman who just called me to tell me that his dog had passed. I, trying to be professional, wasn't exactly sure what to do. I'd all but promised a bar mitzvah and wasn't sure what my position was as a rabbi. And so I called an older colleague. And I told him the story humorously. Can you imagine? I just got my first call. I spent all this time. I found out it was their dog. What should I do? To which the rabbi cautioned me and said, I'm sorry, you made your first major mistake. When someone calls and is crying, you should cry with them. The why is irrelevant. When someone is upset and in time of need, where, why, when, whether you do or don't understand is irrelevant. Someone is in pain. You should be in pain with them. My dear friends, a lesson that I took to heart that very day, but that really resonated the day our little mayor was born. The first few months of his life were difficult. We spent a tremendous amount of time in and out of hospitals. But today, I want to tell you 2 quick stories about Friendship Circle and then leave you with a thought. While we were in the hospital, there were 2 young ladies who at the time was just the beginning of Friendship Circle. The idea was coming about, and these 2 young ladies who lived in the Hartford area heard about what we were going through. And hours in the hospital. I don't remember sleeping days on end. And one day we received a visit from this young lady, and she said as follows, my name is Nikki, and you don't know me, but I would love to help you. Do you think it would be okay if I came at night and spent 3 to 4 hours with your son so that you could get some sleep? I cannot describe what that felt like. At first we were a little nervous, but soon we found out that Nikki was an extraordinary young lady, and that Nikki did everything to make our son feel comfortable. The things that she did, the nights that she came, I still can't imagine how she did it. Of course, it was months till we found out that she was actually in medical school and had her own work to do. But that never stopped her. Night after night, she would come and spend time with our son. And I'm proud to say, last week, we went to a little party. She is now officially a pediatric cardiologist. And then, Rachel, a sweet young lady who herself has challenges and could be characterized as special needs, found out that our son was struggling in our little town. She lived about 2 blocks away and heard that Chabad was doing Friendship Circle. And so about 4 years ago, she called us out of the blue. She said, I understand that you are struggling with your son. I would like to do something for him. You see, she said, I spent the first 9 years of my life in a hospital. And now that I'm able to get around, I want to do everything I can to help others. Rachel came, wheelchair bound, to our home. But before you know it, she had our son Mayor mesmerized. She would read to him for hours on end. And again, here was someone that worried about our child as we did. An extraordinary young lady. I can't imagine what we would have done without the friendship circle and the wonderful, wonderful volunteers that it entails. My friends, I'll leave you tonight with 2 quick stories. I'll explain the relevance and ultimately why I'm here today. You know, in life, we choose to do whatever it is that we want to. Whatever profession you choose, I chose a rabbi because they told me I'd make a lot of money. That hasn't worked out yet. My son promised me to go into a profession that would keep me in the lifestyle I want to get used to. Now I realize it means poverty. But ultimately, we choose our professions and what we want to do. And then there are people, like many of you here today, that we don't necessarily get to choose, but we have the privilege that God sends down a special soul into our lives. That God chooses us as parents and says, you are the right parents for this unique, for this special, for this wonderful young neshama and young soul. I want you to be its guardian. Our holy rabbis tell us that a human being comes into this world with 2 very important necessities and things to accomplish. Number 1, to work on themselves to become a better person. And number 2, to help others. Many of these very special children are unable really to work on themselves, so their whole life is to inspire others. When people come to our home and my son smiles, it lights up a room. Many therapists have told us that when they come to our home and they're having a difficult day, looking at our little mayor lifts them up. Yes, I won't sugarcoat it. We have sleepless nights. There are times that we struggle. But we are forever blessed and grateful for the beautiful soul that we've been given. When my son was about 1 year old, he had an emergency surgery. We were sitting Friday night at the Chabad table, a lot of guests, and all of a sudden, unfortunately, my son bled out. There was an EMT, and thank God a doctor. In every Jewish house, there's always going to be a doctor too. He took one look at my son, and by ambulance, a few minutes later, we were on our way to the hospital. The surgeon, thank God, who was there, she saw him, took one look, and he went into emergency surgery all Friday night. Saturday morning, Shabbat, she came in and told us the good news was that the surgery seems to have been successful. The bad news, unfortunately, is that they don't and are unable to wake him. But they're sure that eventually he will. Nights turned into weeks, weeks into months, and our mayor did not awake. As a father, I will tell you, I had a very, very hard time. It says God doesn't give you more than you can handle. Well, I guess I was at handle because I was having a very hard time. To watch my son laying there in bed with tubes and pipes. And one day, as I was leaving the hospital, my wife and I would trade in. I was there all night. In the morning, my wife would take over. I had a conversation. And I want to tell you with whom I had this conversation, my friends. It was with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. For those not familiar, the Rebbe, of course, was a tremendous Jewish figure, the Rebbe of the world of all Jews, and cared for every Jew individually. We had the privilege to meet the Rebbe many times, and I felt at that moment, more than anything in the world, I needed a sign that the Rebbe was there with me, that God had not forgotten us. But I needed an obvious sign. I'm sorry, I'm not a very spiritual person by nature. A butterfly flying on my head wouldn't work. A little beautiful wind or a flower growing at the right place just wouldn't do it. I needed something so concrete and so obvious. And so I went downstairs and the concierge stood there. I gave him my $10 bill. He gave me change. I waited for my car. I looked down at one of the dollar bills. This is what it said. Kibalti miyad kodshay shel kveit kedushas ad mishlita b'yom gimel el tavshem vav. I received this said the person writing on it, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe on the 3rd of Elul, 1986. The 3rd of Elul was the day that my grandfather passed away and that my son was named after. Standing there in the parking lot with this dollar, I began to cry. I couldn't imagine how was this possible, but for me it was a good enough sign. I called my wife and said, I know everything is going to be just fine. And 45 minutes later, my son awoke. Fast forward 8 years, my son, thank God, has nursing care, the wonderful people and therapists that help him, again, for all of those who spend their time and effort helping out children with special needs. I cannot tell you how unique and special you all are. But alas, with insurance difficulties, it became apparent, unfortunately, in Hartford at least, that in order to qualify for a nurse, you had to literally have a pole sticking out of your head. Otherwise, there was nothing we could say that would make them give us nursing. Eventually, back and forth, arguments, doctor letters, but after half a year of arguing, they informed us, the insurance company did, that we would no longer have a nurse. My wife was devastated. This is a full-time job. What were we going to do? To come up with the $70,000, $80,000 needed was impossible. At the time, they did us a favor. They gave us a young lady, not a nurse, who would come for 2 hours a day, just to allow my wife to shower for a moment and do a few things. And then the appeals department began calling. And these wonderful people, a young lady called, and she said, hello, Rabbi Samuels. My name is Patricia. I am from the appeals department. My first question to you is, how is your Rebbitzin doing? I said, Rebbitzin, are you Jewish? She said, I can't tell you that over the phone. She said, I'm going to do everything possible to help you. With God's help. God's help, are you Jewish? I can't tell that. Over the next few months, she worked tirelessly. She did everything possible to make sure that we could get our nurse back. But alas, came Passover that year, and we were informed right before going to the Seder that she had exhausted every single appeal, and unfortunately, it was not to be. Unless, God forbid, we were informed our son went back in emergency surgery to the hospital, we no longer would get a nurse. Once again, I hear, enter the Lubavitcher Rebbe. There is a custom, for those unfamiliar, that many go to New York to the graveside of this very holy man, the Rebbe, and ask for blessings. And so on a particular Thursday, I went down to ask for a blessing. It was very difficult. And here yet again, as I'm ready to walk in, my wife calls. She's in tears. The young lady who came for 2 hours a day just found a better job and was leaving as well. My wife was devastated. Not to worry, I said. I have that letter you gave me to read to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And so I did. I stood there that day, humbled, broken, and I read my wife's words, which were as follows. Dear Rebbe, first I want to thank God for the wonderful gift that I have been privileged with my husband to take care of. But we are people of flesh and blood, and my body simply cannot handle doing it all on our own. We ask you to please, a blessing, bring back our nurse 40 hours a week. But then you got a bargain, so my wife writes in parentheses, I'll take 20. But then she ends the letter with, but I really do need a nurse 40 hours a week. I wrote the letter, I read it, threw it in, I turned around, my phone rang. As God is my witness, I pick up the phone. Hello, Rabbi. How's the Rebbitzin? It's been months. I said, is this you, Patricia? It is. And how is your Rebbitzin? I said, fine, Patricia. Are you Jewish? She said, I can't tell you that over the phone. She said, Rabbi, what did you do? I said, do? That's a large question. I do a lot of things. She said, who did you speak to? I said, I speak to a lot of people. She said, well, in my 20 years working here, this has never happened. But I want you to know that at this moment I hold a letter. They have overturned 6 months of denial. You just got back your nurse 40 hours a week. To which I excitedly say, Patricia, do you know where I am now? I am by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. She says, I've heard of the Rebbe. I said, tell me, are you Jewish? She said, I'm sorry, I can't tell you over the phone. But I wish you well, sei gesund. Calling my wife afterwards, you can only imagine. She didn't believe me. Monday morning, my friends, Monday morning we got that certified letter telling us the nurse was coming back. But you all know in dealing with this, it's not as though the agency has on a shelf a bunch of nurses. They have to find the nurse. It has to be the right one. It has to be a match. But I had an idea. I figured we're on a roll. We had a wonderful nurse for many years, a young Jamaican woman, Marva, who took care of our son. I figured it couldn't hurt. I called her up after 6 months. I said, Marva, guess what? The Lord has been good to us. We get back our nursing. By any chance, are you available? To which he said, Rabbi, in a very thick Jamaican accent, Rabbi, I thought you were a man of faith. I knew the Lord would be bringing me back to you. I've been waiting for this call. I'll be there in the morning. And so, my dear friends, yet again, when the impossible seems impossible, when we heard 1,000 times, it can't be, he won't, again and again, they have been proven wrong. My dear friends, Friendship Circle is an organization that changes lives, but not just for the wonderful, beautiful children that they take care of, but for the beautiful volunteers, many of who are here tonight. Teenagers who have a whole life. One of my favorite titles, Mom, Dad, I Hate You. Can you drive me to the mall? Every moment of a teenager's life is busy. With what? I'm not sure, but they're busy. Can you help me know I'm busy? Yet these same individuals spend time every week with these beautiful children. I don't think you know what it means to parents to have you to come to our home. What it means to a parent to know you gave up your afternoon to spend time with my child. And so for all of you people out there, what you do, there's nothing more precious. But for you tonight, or today, that support financially Friendship Circle, I have to tell you, I can't think of a greater mitzvah. I can't think of a more worthier cause. Because you now become a part of an organization that literally saves lives. Whether it's the child, the parent who needs those few moments, or whether it's the community at large. We live in a world where again and again we hear about atrocities and things that go on. But my friends here in this room, we see the beauty of this beautiful world. It is you, each and every one of you, that makes it bearable. It is you, each and every one of you, that makes a difference. So from my little family and from all of us at Friendship Circle, thank you, thank you, thank you.